I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life.
We have some big news right now. Donald Trump's administration has officially shut down reproductiverights.gov.
It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
So what does fertility care and donor conception look like under a Trump presidency? Let's talk about it, because what's up? My name is Laura, and I'm your donor conceived person of the internet. So first off, let's just acknowledge that you have every right to be scared. This is scary. We're literally seeing red flags. I mean, the ultimate red flag. Just yesterday was the inauguration, and things that were said then were very disturbing. But not only things that were said were disturbing, but actions that were taken were also quite alarming. He is not slow rolling anything out. His administration is moving very swift, very quick, and telling all of us immediately what their agenda is. Yesterday, the reproductiverights.gov page was shut down. They're moving fast. Before we go into it, please like, subscribe, tickle the little bell so that you can stay up to date on all of these administrative moves that could impact the fertility industry and donor conception. So the reproductiverights.gov website had a lot of things in it. It talked about access to birth control, access to abortions. So the fact that it is shut down is alarming. Everyone obviously is very scared about access to abortion. But how can that affect fertility care and donor conception? Well, we know that IVF has certainly been in the news and heavily debated. In case you don't know, IVF, in vitro fertilization, is when we retrieve an egg, get a sperm, and we fertilize it in a petri dish. We create an embryo and then transfer it back into the uterus. Many alt-right and Christian fundamentalists have been very against IVF for decades. One of the reasons they have been against IVF is because when you do IVF, you typically create a bunch of embryos, so you have many different chances at IVF. And many of those groups count those embryos as alive. And it is wrong to discard them, and that is why you see a big push for embryo adoption, because we need to save the poor little embryos from the freezer. Now, before we go on, I do want to make this very clear. What I'm about to tell you are my theories. This is my hypothesis. We don't know if this is actually going to happen. So please don't run away from these videos that these are facts. I am letting you into my brain, and I am letting you see what I am kind of looking for and what I'm on the watch for. So this video is not a call for us to be panicked, it is a call for us to be vigilant. So people have been worried that Trump is going to ban IVF, and he has said that he is not going to. Now, his words hold no weight with me. That is why I'm going to pay attention to his actions. I don't think he's going to ban IVF. He is a money guy. IVF brings in a ton of money, and his party keeps complaining about the declining birth rate. And remember, his boy Elon is very obsessed with procreation. I don't think they're going to get rid of a method that is not only incredibly lucrative, but helps a ton of people conceive. But potentially, who IVF is available for could change. Trump in his inauguration speech very clearly said this:
that there are only two genders, male and female.
He has not only surrounded himself with anti-queer politicians, and of course Project 2025 is riddled with anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and dog whistles. I could see him making IVF very hard to access if you are not married and het cis. And again, this is just my theory, but I think that they want to keep IVF because they want to boost embryo adoption. IVF and abortion access go hand in hand. If we limit abortion access, IVF gets very tricky. Revoking Roe v. Wade makes things very complicating with discarding leftover embryos from IVF. So the concern is, if we limit access to abortion, is that going to affect IVF and not allow parents to discard leftover embryos, since under this new law, hypothetically, they would be counted as a life, and therefore force parents to give up leftover embryos to embryo adoption? Because that's what happened in Alabama. In February 2024, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that embryos that are created through in vitro fertilization are children, and the destruction of any embryo should be considered wrongful death of a minor. And this halted IVF in the state of Alabama for a period of time, because doctors and clinics were just too scared to do IVF. They couldn't take that risk. Now, I personally think, this is my theory, I don't think Alabama meant to do that. I don't think they meant for IVF to completely halt. I personally think that they were hoping this was going to boost embryo adoption. Listen to what Senator Tommy Tuberville said immediately after this ruling.
Do you have a reaction to the Alabama Supreme Court ruling on the fact that embryos are children?
Yeah, I was all for it. You know, you just got to look at everything going on in the country. It's just an attack on families, attack on kids. You know, anything that we can do for the future of our young people, because they're our #1 commodity, We need to have more kids. We need to have an opportunity to do that. And I thought this was the right thing to do. But
IVF is used to have more children, and right now IVF services are paused at some of the clinics in Alabama. Aren't you concerned that this could impact people who are trying to have kids?
Well, that's for another conversation. I think the big thing is right now you go back to the situation and try to work it out to where it's best for everybody. I mean, that's what the whole abortion issue is about. So
this really isn't about abortion. It's about IVF and the concern that now families might not have access to it.
But it's about the same direction. But I agree. But people need to have access. People need to have. We need more kids. We need the people to have the opportunity to have kids. You know, I'd have to look at the entire bill of how it's written. I have not seen it.
Supreme Court decision.
Well, I know that, but I'd have to look. I haven't looked at it. But this is state issue.
Women aren't going to be able to have IVF treatments already in some places.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
What do you say to them?
Unfortunate.
He didn't think IVF was going to get banned. It kind of sounds like he thought more kids were going to get born. And we all heard him refer to children as a commodity.
You know, anything that we can do for the future of our young people, because they're our number one commodity.
Okay, so let's put it all together. Why would they be doing this? I think that the people who've been complaining about the declining birth rate are trying to flood the market with embryos and get those babies popping. But there's one more piece to it. All the stats that we have on IVF show that the majority of users of IVF are white. So this wouldn't just flood the market with embryos, it would flood the market with white embryos. Remember, the fertility industry was founded on eugenics. They know how to do this very well. They still do it today. This is their bread and butter. Check out this article that was written in 2022 by the Wall Street Journal stating that only 2% of active donors are Black. I also have 2 donor profiles from 2 major cryobanks that use racial derogatory slurs on them. This profile here is from Seattle Sperm Bank from 2022. Look at how they racially categorize the donors. Caucasian, Black/Black, Asian/yellow, red/other. Asian/yellow in 2022. But wait, there's more! This was a donor profile that was sent to intended recipient parents in 2022. The couple was a biracial couple and they were specifically looking for a Black sperm donor because the intended non-genetic parent is Black. It's very typical for recipient couples to look for a donor that matches the intended non-genetic parent. But as we just talked about from the Wall Street Journal, not a lot of options available. So they started looking at this profile and it seemed normal at first until they got to the section that described the donor's parents. And how did they racially categorize the donor's father? They used that word. I'm not gonna say it. If you are unaware of this word, it's a very derogatory slur to say to somebody who is biracial, specifically Black and white. Here's a clip of an interview I did with Dr. Diane Tober. Dr. Diane Tober is the leading researcher in egg donation side effects. Listen to the difference in payment of egg donors.
If I look at my quantitative data on how much donors were paid by race, okay? So I can see Asian donors and select white donors. Their highest compensation is like in my data is about $50,000-$60,000. The highest I've heard is $250,000 for one cycle with a Chinese American donor at MIT. Right. And if you look at, for example, Hispanic and Black donors, their highest paid cycles are about $12,000. So there's a huge gap, a huge pay gap between the highest paid of Black and Hispanic donors compared to white and Asian donors, which already represents some of the discrepancies we have in compensation for other aspects of, work in the United States.
We have heard consistently from recipient parents of color that it is incredibly hard to find a donor that matches their family's ethnicity. So hard that they eventually give up and just end up choosing a white donor. What does that sound like to you? DeBrat talked about this literal exact same thing when they were going through donor conception. So again, that is my theory and why I think it. I'm obviously not 100% sure as to what is going to happen, but what I am sure of is if you care about reproductive rights, reproductive health, access to fertility care, LGBTQIA rights, donor-conceived rights, then we need to stay vigilant. Let's stay alert and pay attention to the actions of this administration. None of us have the luxury to stay uninformed. And if you have not subscribed, please do so you can stay up to date on all fertility and donor conception news. Remember to also check out my podcast, Insemination, where I interview donor-conceived people, recipient parents, donors, and members of the fertility industry. Also, please make sure you check out my stand-up schedule at www.laurahighfive.com. Remember that we are stronger together to lean into community because we need each other. I love you all.